Welcome back to another Q&A. Every couple of months I ask you to ask me questions on the community tab, and in today's video I'm going to answer them. If you would like to ask me a question next time around, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you can keep an eye on my community tab next time I ask for questions. But let's get right into it. They will all just in chronological order, first come, first serve, and I'll leave a timestamp in the description with every single question so you can skip to the questions that are most relevant to you. However, if you would love to support me, I would appreciate if you watch the whole video. Watching my videos is by far the best way for you guys to support me, and it's for free, so I'd love for you to watch the full video and engage with it. Leave a like, leave a comment, share it with friends so it can reach as many people as possible, and I would very much appreciate that. And so would Brett, huh? Alrighty, there's over 80 questions, so I'm trying my best to get through all of them. Alrighty, first question. What was your most expensive plant? Actually, it's right there, the Queen. Over there, the one on the my far left, your far right. I think I paid just over $400 for it back in the days. It's been about I think that was 3 years ago. And back then there was a fairly reasonable-ish price for a Queen. They are much more affordable right now. But yeah, in general, I don't like to talk about pricing too much. Whenever I do talk about costs of plant or pricing of plants or value of plants, I feel like it takes away from the actual plant, and it's so highly situational. Yes, it really depends on where you live. Also, like 400 Australian dollars are not 400 US dollars, and for 400 Australian dollars you can have much less purchasing power in Australia than you would have with 400 Australian dollars converted into US dollars in the US. Australia has a very high cost of living, but also a very high minimum wage. So, you know, if you make, let's say, 40 bucks an hour, then $400 isn't as expensive as if you'd make $2.50 an hour, right? So we can't just look at pricing without looking at conversion rate, cost of living, minimum wage, average wage, and so on, right? So I don't like to talk about prices, but in general, I don't buy really expensive plants, to be honest. I'm happy to be patient and wait for them to get cheaper. And with, you know, more and more plants coming out of tissue culture, that is happening as we speak. Or I like to get really small plants, or share a purchase with a friend, or something like that. So I'm very much, I think over the years I definitely converted more into being a plant grower than a plant collector. I don't need to collect all the fanciest plants and the most expensive plants and so on. But the Queen back in the days, I think $400, I think it was 415, what a random number. That was the most amount of money I ever spent on one plant. If you'd had to move to a different country other than Australia or Germany, where would you go? Definitely somewhere warm. And I suppose I would love to go somewhere where they speak English. I honestly don't know. I wouldn't mind New Zealand. Actually, I've lived in New Zealand for a year as well. It's so beautiful, but it is cold and it's really far away. I don't know, to be honest. I haven't really ever thought about that. I mean, I already have 2 homes, Germany and Australia. I think that's enough. I've always been very intrigued about visiting South Africa, whether it's a country I would want to live in, different, but I think I would absolutely love the nature South Africa has to offer. Maybe just some cute little island. Maybe I'll just move to Bali. What was your first plant and do you still have it? What is the hardest plant in your collection? I don't really know like my first plant. I had some cacti that I just randomly like accumulated. I think the first plant I ever put on a moss pole is my Monstera siltepecana and my Monstera adansonii. I think I planted them both on the moss pole on the same day, if I'm not mistaken, and that would have been just over 4 years ago. and I still have both, and I still have them on moss poles. But they aren't like not all my first plant. They were just my first plant on a moss pole. And my hardest plant in my collection, probably, I mean, there's some plants that died, so obviously they were harder, but the one that's still alive, I would probably say here, the Vicia over here. I grew this from seed, and I think in October, that is also 4 years ago. So yeah, and this is the only seed that survived, and this is the biggest it's ever been. So it really doesn't like my conditions, but that's okay. It's alive, but I'm just having no success with it. Well, it's okay. I focus on the other plants I have success with instead. Have you ever misplaced a plant? Misplaced? As in like I lost it in my own home. I forgot about some plants. I wouldn't say misplaced, I literally just forgot them. Sometimes when they're too much in plain sight, like they just become part of the furniture and I forget about them. Definitely there were some in my greenhouse. AJ sent me some plants for like a rescue box, and I put a couple of them just in a box and then in my greenhouse, and I forgot to open that box for 4 months. And the plants were still alive, they just did nothing. So I definitely have forgotten about plants, yes, but I wouldn't say misplaced. What do you do when you're away, traveling, etc. to make sure your impressive plant collection and bread are cared for? Well, that's easier. I now have a housemate, so I'm not the only one living here. I'm not the only one taking care of Mr. Brettles. Bloop. So my housemate is in charge of Brettles when I'm gone, and Tim is in charge of my plants when I'm gone. And I have worked very hard over the last 2 to 3 years to uplift his knowledge around plants, right? So I mean, I've given him a lot of plants as well, and care tips, and I actually make him watch all of my YouTube videos before they get released to give me the confidence that I'm not delusional. So he's forced to watch all of my videos. So I think I think he's in a great position to take care of my plants when I'm gone, because he knows exactly what I do to these plants. Now and then obviously he can always ask me questions when I'm gone, but I don't leave the house all too much. The last time that actually happened, where, I was in Adelaide for 3 days the other day, but all I needed was my housemate to just hose down some of the plants outside, which was really easy. It was only 3 days. But the last time I needed somebody to actually care for my plants when I was on holidays is almost 2 years ago. I don't travel much. It's very expensive. And even rent is very expensive. Like, I pay so much money in rent. I can't afford to pay that much money in rent and then not even be here. Right? So, well, I like paying I don't like paying a lot of money in rent, but to me, putting a lot of money into the place that I live in is really important, because even if I were to travel, you're most likely going to travel for 2 to 3 weeks of the year, and the other, 50 weeks of the year, you end up spending here. So to me, it's more important to put my money towards rent than travel. But I would definitely love to change that eventually. But I think that's a whole topic for another video. Anyway, next question. If you had to be stuck in a movie, which movie would you choose? I love how some of these questions are getting a little bit further away from just talking about plants. I really like that. So thanks for showing some interest in me as a person and not just my plants. I would probably, like, super cliche millennial, but I would have to probably choose Harry Potter, because I wouldn't just be stuck in a movie. I would be stuck in a whole universe. And I always wanted to be a wizard, and I definitely would be a Gryffindor, just letting you know, okay? I don't accept any... Yeah, what do you think? You would be Slytherin, I think, my darling. No, you would be like a Hufflepuff, I think, my baby. Mwah. How often do you fertilize your plants, especially anthuriums? Have you considered growing anthuriums using semi-hydro lacquer? So basically, I provide my GT Foliage Focus. It's always linked in the description, by the way. I use that in a weak dilution, which is around 3 to 5 milliliters per liter of water. And I provide that with every watering. Now, watering frequency changes with the conditions, so less frequent in winter, more frequent in summer. So as a result of that, I would obviously also then provide less nutrients in winter than I do in summer, because it comes with every watering. Every like 3, 4, 5 waterings or so, I might also take my plants outside. If possible, let the rain just water them and flush everything out, or I'll take them outside and hoist them down. So I do have waterings where I do not provide nutrients as well, but rule of thumb would be to provide nutrients with every watering. That is how Foliage Focus is designed to be used. So if you use a different fertilizer or a different nutrient, then you potentially also have to change the way that it's provided. But I'm just following the recommendations on the bottle, and it's been working really well for me for almost 4 years now. And that also obviously applies to my anthuriums then. And no, I have not really considered growing them in semi-hydro leca, because I'm having great success with my chunky aeroid mix. So I don't really feel the need to so fundamentally change the way that I grow. And if I start growing just 1 or 2 plants in semi-hydro, I feel like that plant would be the odd one out, and I don't want to have a whole new care routine just for that one plant. It makes sense if your whole collection is in semi-hydro, you know what I mean? Then all of the effort of like measuring pH and adjusting and whatnot and so on, you do that with all of your plants. But if I just now would do it with 1 or 2, I feel like the effort would not necessarily be worth the reward. And I'm not even looking for any more reward than this. I'm very happy with what I've already got. So, I think alocasias would probably be the first plant I would try in semi-hydro, not necessarily anthuriums. Actually, the next question is exactly that. Do you use semi-hydro / leca? What's your take on it? Is it a reliable way to grow plants and just not your cup of tea, or is it a trend you think will fade away? I don't think it's a trend. I think it's been around for a long time, and if you look it up on YouTube, there's many creators that use leca. There's the Leca Queen in Melbourne, for example, another Australian creator that grows most of her plants in leca with great success as well. So I think you can certainly have success with it. I think it comes back to the topic that I kind of keep going in circles on every time I talk to you guys, is conditions and care. If your plants are growing in the right conditions, so you give them sufficient light, good temperatures, good humidity and good airflow, then your care approach can be pretty flexible, and you'll just realize the potential that the conditions have set. And in choosing a medium like, leca or aeroid mix or whatever you might choose, that's just the care. So if the conditions are right, you have flexibility in the care approach to realize the potential. But if your conditions aren't right, then leca isn't going to make or break your plant, you know what I mean? But ultimately I have very little experience with it, so I can't really talk about it, and my hesitation in using it is just as per the previous question. Alright, next question. What do you know about the growth of Anthurium crystallinum in the wild? Well, let's say planted in a garden at least. Nothing. I know absolutely nothing. I don't have any anthuriums planted in my garden. They're all in pots. I have some of them in my greenhouse, but most of them are right next to you over here. So if I don't have any experience around something, then I should probably not talk about it. So unfortunately, I can't help you with that. As a full-time content creator now, what's one thing from an old wish list you're excited about exploring that previously your corporate job was an obstacle to? I think, oh my god, there's so many things. I think just having Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 available to do the things that I want to do and the things that I need to do is so valuable. For example, back, when I had my normal 9 to 5, like if I want to exercise, I have to go before work, which isn't really my cup of tea, or I have to go after work when everybody else is also doing that. So you're hitting the gym when it's super busy, super full, which isn't really the atmosphere that I want to really do my best work in, if that makes sense. Even like things like going to the doctor. Like the doctor is usually open while I'm working. Going to the shops are usually open while I'm working, and so on. So there's all of these things that, and so that I then used to have to just cramp into the weekend when, everybody goes to the bloody shops on the weekend. So it's an absolute zoo, it's a nightmare. So it's actually the small things in life that I now enjoy so much more because I can do them when it's not super packed, when it's not like there's no queues, you know. I don't think there's like this one big thing, like this big ticket item where like, oh my God, I finally unlocked this. I think it's really the small things on a day-to-day basis that I'm excited about. Specifically exercise, just being able to, you know, go for a run during the middle of the day when it's nice and warm. Right now we are very quickly heading into winter over here, and it's pitch black at 5 o'clock, and it's not really light till like I don't know what time is sunrise in the morning. Sunrise is 6:30ish, so it would probably be bright by 7 or something like that. So pretty much the times I would normally spend at work. So being able to take advantage of the daylight hours, I think that is the one thing I'm most excited about, actually. Yeah, okay, I take everything back. Being able to take advantage of daylight hours is my favorite thing, specifically going into winter over here. Loving your new channel. Are there any other content creators you particularly enjoy watching or that inspire you? And is there anyone you would love to collaborate with? Well, first of all, thank you. And a really good question, actually. I think over the last few years, I was so busy creating content and having my full-time job, I wasn't really able to consume that much content. So I'm really looking forward to having a bit more time for that, and also then learn from other creators. But when I do consume content, I kind of try and stay away from plant content. At this stage, it's already my job and my hobby and pretty much my whole life. So I also want to diversify my life a little bit and my interests. So, but I am also trying to set a few more goals for my business next year. And as part of my goals for the business, I want to do more collaborations with other plant content creators and exchange knowledge and just connect. So I definitely want to do that. And there was also something that my corporate job was just holding me back on before. I had so little time to actually do these things. I'm relying on, I have a really short window where I can actually create and edit content. And well, if you want to collaborate with somebody else, then you also need to take their availability into account, and I just didn't have that luxury back in the days. But now that I do this full time, I definitely want to collaborate with more people, and especially collaborate with people from all over the world. So people from Europe, people from America, people from Africa, people from Asia. So I can kind of broaden my understanding of growing in different parts of the world and conditions, and kind of just exchange a little bit. So maybe even like podcast style, where I just invite them and ask them some questions. So I don't know. Leave a suggestion down below. Who would you like me to collaborate with? When did you get your cat? Story about adopting him. I adopted 2 cats on the 1st of January 2018. So it's been 6 years of having Brad, and I adopted with my old housemate back then. We adopted Brad and his brother. His brother passed away after just over a year. He ran across the street and got hit by a car, which was very traumatic for both of us, wasn't it? And ever since then, it's just Brad and I. And yeah, it's obviously sad, but we make a great team, don't we? So I'm still grateful I got one of them. His brother was called Max, and I put in a photo over here for you. Those two were so cute, and I'm so happy that Brad did have his brother growing up to play with. They had such a good time. They were so loving to each other. But obviously, as they grew up, they started getting a little bit more distant compared to the kitten stage. But I'm really happy he had his brother with him while he was growing up. I think that turned him into such a chilled cat. Next one. Would you ever buy a Spiritus Sancti if you find one for cheap? Actually, they have come out of tissue culture, and I saw them for sale for like $80 recently. So that is pretty cheap for Australia, and considering how pricey this plant was historically. So I feel the need to be productive, so I'm going to put a few grow verticals together while I answer the questions. But I haven't really considered buying it because we're going into the wrong season. I mean, I always say that it's growing season 365 days of the year inside, but I'm very challenged with the space that I've got inside while still having good light. So a lot of my plants are outside, and I started bringing a few of my plants from the greenhouse inside to overwinter because I'm not planning on heating anything outside, honestly. Not worth it. They need to fight for their survival and they'll recover during spring. So I'm probably going to get one in spring when I've actually got a bit of space for the plants. Don't really need one right now. Also, to be honest, I mean, with Spiritus Sancti, I think it definitely has very nice features. It has like really nice elongated leaves, but I think it's more the hype that actually makes people get a Spiritus Sancti. I don't think it's like the nicest plant in history. If I see one conveniently right there, and then I'll definitely get one. But it's not like, I like the velvets or like things with fenestrations, like really long elongated leaves aren't necessarily the thing that I'm really excited about. I mean, I've got the Adabapoense, I've got the Billy. I feel like I've got a few of these plants already that, you know, have these sort of features. So yeah, I'm not like dying to get one, to be honest. I think the thing that bothers me the most with it is like the growth pattern. It's like a Billy, it's gonna just start spreading in all directions and it's gonna take up a lot of space, and I don't really know how to maneuver and navigate that. So I'll get one eventually, but I'm just not in a rush. It's just not like this plant that makes me like super excited about having it. What are some plants you would love to own but are too expensive where you live? I don't really know. There's nothing like crazy on my wish list at the moment, I think. I definitely saw a, what was it called? Monstera Burlamax Flame. I saw that at the Collector's Plant Fair and it was still very pricey. And it looks nice, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, it looks, I don't know. To me, it's a plant that looks nice if I can buy it for $50. If I need to spend $500 on it, or $800 or $1,000 or whatever, it's not that nice in my opinion. So I don't know. I think at the moment I don't really have any plants on my wish list. I would like to add a few more carnivorous plants, but I don't have like any specific on my wish list. Just if I see one and I like it, then yeah, I'll get it. I think I definitely, at the beginning of my plant hobby, I had like an actual wish list. I had an iPhone notes, you know, on my phone, and I would have like all of the plants on there that I want, and then I would like tick them off as I buy them. But as my plant collection matures, I find so much more satisfaction in growing my existing plants rather than just constantly adding new ones. And almost like the thought of adding new ones like makes me like nervous, because I'm like, what am I gonna do if all of these plants actually survive and grow up and all become really large? Like, what am I gonna do? I'm just really happy with my plant collection as it is, and if I buy more plants, there will probably be plants that I know that will do well in my garden, or that will do well outside year round in Sydney, so I don't have to worry about the space that they might take up and so on. So yeah, some natives, I definitely want to buy some more natives, but yeah, I don't really have a traditional wish list. I think the plants that I want to buy, I'm not necessarily aware of. Actually, I want to get a Gloriosum white vein, but it's not expensive. It's like $30, so I could get it any time. I just not right now. I wouldn't know what to do with it right now. I don't think this answered your question, right? Actually, basically in a nutshell, no, there's no like plant I have on my wish list and I'm just holding off because it's too expensive. Do I sometimes see plants that I would be like, oh, I want to buy this, then I see the price tag and then say no? Definitely, but I wouldn't say they're on my wish list. They're just like a desire then and there, spontaneous. Hi, love your collection and videos. What is your newest project? My project at the moment is turning this into a more well-rounded business with a diversified income stream. So I think my projects aren't necessarily super planty at the moment, if that makes sense. Like, of course, I have some planty projects on every now and then, like some experiments. I have a lot of plants that I bought around about a year ago, where I started making videos and like updates every couple of months that are all coming to maturity now. So they're like, those are videos I started a year ago that I'm hopefully soon be able to finalize and show you like the proof. So there's a lot of projects that I'm constantly working on that you guys don't necessarily get to see, because I'll just show them to you once I'm done with the project. But yeah, my immediate focus right now is definitely building this into a business. As part of that, I do want to release merch, but I've been very hesitant in releasing merch. I have some samples and yeah, they all look good, but they still end up just being a t-shirt with a logo on it, which is not bad. I don't mind the t-shirt with a logo on it, but I'm not excited about it at this stage. I don't know. If I want to do something, I want to feel excited about it. And then the other project I'm working on is actually just reducing my reliance on my specific plants as part of my income stream, right? Like, I mean, most of my content is heavily relying on me growing hundreds of plants in my house. But I am a renter, and I do need to understand that realistically I might have to move again this time next year. And I can't continuously one-up myself with every move and find a house that is even bigger and even nicer, because it's just getting really, really expensive. And now that I don't have my second job anymore, I do need to watch my costs as well. So I would like to be in a position where I'm not just relying on my plants to create content. So, you know, maybe go out and create content with other people and their plants and learn from them and so on. But also create content that isn't just planty, hence my second channel, so that I can diversify my income stream, so that by the time I have to move again, I am not relying on bringing all of my plants with me to still be able to continue with this endeavor. Not saying that I don't want to keep growing all of my plants and I wouldn't love to take them with me, but the house hunting situation and the cost of living situation is so crazy. I don't want this to hold me back. I'm already challenged because every time I'm looking for a rental, I'm looking for a rental that allows pets, which already reduces the type of places I can get by like 75%, right? Like only a quarter of places will even allow me to have a cat in the first place. So I'm already looking at a really small amount of places. There's really high demand. It's getting really, really expensive. So if I can put myself in a better situation where I can be like, you know what, I can move in there. Yes, I can't bring all of my plants, but no, this is not straight away ruining my whole life and my job and my income stream, then that would just give me a little bit more peace of mind and would make me less anxious about the inevitable having to move yet again. I would also love to put myself in a position to maybe not have to rent next time I need to move. So those are my projects that I'm kind of working on. I don't think that was the question that you asked, but that's the answer that I'm giving. So lots and lots of planty projects as always, but my focus at the moment is very much on how do I make this a sustainable lifestyle without my entire life just being consumed by plants, if that makes sense. What is the best light intensity in foot candles to promote anthurium growth? I don't really measure light much, and I think foot candle is it can give you a good indicator of light levels, but it's not necessarily the best way to measure because it actually measures the human perception of light, not the perception that plants have. But there is a guy, I saw a video on Instagram the other day, he went through and I think it's something with plant gay, your plant, local plant. I'll put in his Instagram when I find it. I hope I can find it again. But he was somewhere in the jungle. Somebody messaged me actually about that guy as well. And then it randomly popped up on my feed. But he's somewhere in the jungle and like in nature. And he actually looks at some anthuriums and he has a light meter reading with him. And he measures the light for the anthuriums, and it was really, really dark where they grow. So I don't think anthuriums need that much light to really grow nicely. I mean, you can see the ones over here, there's a south-facing window and they're supported by one Mother Life Spectrum. By the way, that Life Spectrum is still on pre-sale at the moment. It's still the prototype that I'm testing, and you get 25% off with the pre-sale. So I'll link that in the description in case you want to check that out. But yeah, I don't think anthuriums really rely on a lot of light. If you compare that to some of the philodendron or monsteras that I grow up moss poles to mature as well, they have a much higher light requirement. Or you can also check out Houseplant Journal. He does a lot of stuff with he has his own light meter, and he's very scientific with light. Right? I'm very touchy-feely when it comes to light. I just judge by the plant. I don't like to turn this into like another Excel spreadsheet. I just left my corporate job, so I don't have to look at Excel spreadsheets all day long. So yeah. If you lived in Victoria and had to deal with our temperatures, what plants would you consider good options and what you consider harder to grow ones? I don't really know, because I've never lived in Victoria and I don't know how different your climate is, but from what I know is it's cooler. I don't know if you get frost over there as well, and I don't know if you're referring to growing indoors or outdoors. Based on the question, I'm assuming you're referring to outdoors, because I think indoors we're all facing the same challenges, right? The challenge is that you need to heat your house. As part of the heating, you reduce your humidity and the ceiling is blocking the light, right? So that's usually the challenge we're all facing indoors. If that house is in Victoria or Sydney, shouldn't make all too much of a difference, to be really honest. When it comes to the outside, I mean, I'm definitely pushing it and trying to grow some of the tropical plants in Sydney, and not all of them really enjoy it. You'd have better chances in Queensland, but I feel like Victoria might be pushing it a little too far for these, so I would probably go with more native plants. If you want to have success growing outdoors, look at what's already growing outdoors naturally and choose those plants. But a pothos could be fine, I reckon. Do you ever have issues with new philodendron leaves getting stuck, tearing as they come out? If so, any tips? Specifically with my Milano, actually. Usually there could be a case of two things. It could be inconsistent water supply as the leaf is growing up, so you're letting it dry out too much, and or insufficient humidity. Keep in mind, when the plant is producing a new leaf, it's actively growing. It usually requires a little bit more water than if it was not actively growing, right? Because it puts all of the energy and water into inflating that new leaf. So it's usually there. Humidity just makes everything like pop out a bit easier. But what you can also consider is just taking it outside and spraying it with a hose, or like misting it to kind of lubricate the leaf a little bit to open up seamlessly. But I have also noticed that it kind of sometimes grows out of it with maturity. Sometimes it's in this awkward in-between stage, and it just does it. So it happens to me as well. It happens in nature even, right? Nature isn't perfect. Would you ever consider modeling if given the opportunity? I would feel very honored if I would be given that opportunity. I would certainly question the brand. I'll be like, are you sure? But yeah, I just spoke about diversifying my income and not making my income 100% relying on growing houseplants. So yes, that is certainly something I would do. It's always good to have diversified income streams. So yes, at this stage, as long as it's an opportunity that I feel confident with and happy with, and then I would 100% consider that. Same goes to, like, I would definitely go on television. I would do hosting or like anything, you know what I mean? I'm more than happy to try all of these things. Why not? Like, what have I got to lose? And if I don't like it, then I wouldn't do it again. But I think with modeling, it's not necessarily up to me. I think there's other things that are preventing that from happening. Hey Jan, did you have a plant hobby back in Germany? Do you ever wish to have access to plants available in Europe and not here in the Southern Hemisphere? Actually, No, I was never into plants. I left Germany when I was 19, fresh out of high school, and I was never into plants. So I only know about plants that are available in Europe through Instagram as well. And because you guys don't have biosecurity laws in Europe, you usually have more plants available because you can also import internationally. But in Australia, in return, we're getting a lot of tissue cultured plants. So they're really affordable and we don't have to import them or tag them. You know, we don't contribute to plant poaching as a result of that and so on. So I think I'm very lucky with the plants that we've got on offer over here in Australia. You've seen it in the plant fair video as well. For example, we have great variety. Sometimes the pricing is a little bit outrageous as a result of not being able to import. But again, tissue culture brings that down. So no, not really. The plant hobby for me has always been in Australia and I'm used to what we've got available over here and I'm more than happy with what we've got. I think I'm also getting more towards this attitude where I feel like, you know what, I don't need to own every single plant. Like, I'm also just happy to see some plants grow in other people's collections and just maybe follow them on Instagram or something like that. Or sometimes I just see plants, you know, in other people's front yards when I go for a run and I'm like, oh, let's run past the house with the heliconias. I wonder if they're in bloom. They don't need to be my plant for me to be able to appreciate the plant and look at the growth and like, you know what I mean? Like, I go to the botanic gardens and I just look at their plant collection and what's in bloom in their plant collection, what's growing and so on. I'm getting away from this possessiveness of like, I must have it. It must be in my collection, this owning aspect, and rather just appreciate these plants. So if there's some plants that are just not available, then so be it. That's okay. Which popular plants are worth the hype? Which ones, in your opinion, aren't worth the hype? Good question, but I'm not too sure what's actually hyped at the moment. I feel like, as I mentioned before, I don't consume all too much plant content. I don't really have a wish list myself. I definitely don't watch other people's like wish list videos or something like that. So I don't really know what's super hot at the moment. I know a lot of people are like really keen on Anthurium hybrids at the moment, and I spoke about Anthurium hybrids way too much on this channel already, so I'm not gonna talk about all of this again. But at the end of the day, I think anything that is like outrageously expensive is not worth the hype. It's just a plant that can die at any time. If you need to use PayPal or Afterpay or your credit card to buy a plant, then it is not worth having it, right? Like, it's a plant. It could die before you even paid off your bloody loan for the plant. Like, you do not need to be, each to their own, you know, you decide what you put your money towards. But I worked in financial advice for the last 6 years. And my mom and my dad have both been working in banking their whole life. So I feel like I grew up fairly financially responsible. Sorry, halfway through ranting and my camera ran out of battery. And I realized I filmed all of this in slow motion, so I hope the mics have recorded everything and I can somehow stitch that together, but the quality of the footage should now also be better. Fuck, I don't understand. Why don't I check? I don't learn from my mistakes, do I? Anyway, I was just ranting about Afterpay. My mom gave me one lesson. She said, don't spend money that you don't have. The only exception will be a mortgage, because that makes sense. But Uber Eats or a plant? I don't like people telling me what to spend my money on, so obviously rich coming from me, but if you can't pay for a plant with the money that you already have, then it's not worth buying it. If it's hyped or not, doesn't really matter. If you're willing to drop that money on it, it doesn't matter if it's hyped everywhere else, so you create your own hype. I'm not really answering these questions like really well, right? I just use the question as an opportunity to be opinionated. It's not my first Q&A, you would probably know by now. So basically, any plant that is overhyped, I can only speak about Australia because over here I know a little bit about, let's say, what's hyped. I think, and I mentioned that before, the Monstera Burlamax Flame. I think it's hyped because we don't have that many rare plants at the moment here anymore, right? Like we used to have like, oh, the Monstera alba and the Thais and the Obliquas and the Spiritus Sancti. They're all coming out of tissue culture left, right and center and are so readily available and super cheap. I bought an Obliqua for $20. Like 3 years ago, it would have been $3,000, right? So I feel like every plant that is currently being hyped, this will happen to. So I wouldn't buy any plant that's super hyped up at the moment. But yeah, that Burlamax Flame, I feel like is the one plant that's not kind of coming out of tissue culture at the moment. But it is in the country and it's really expensive, and that's why I see hype around it. But I don't understand why people hype something up just because it's expensive. Why wouldn't you hype something up because it's nice? And the Burlamax Flame is not that nice, in my opinion. I mean, it's nice, but it looks like the Pinatipatita, or like very similar, and that one you can buy for $20. Get a Pinatipatita and Uber Eats for the rest of your life, or just by cutting off Burlamax Flame that could still die anytime. I mean, you choose you. But yeah, I'm not really into the whole hype and the rare plant thing at the moment. As I said, I'm a plant grower, not a plant collector, and I want to enjoy the journey of growing them, and I want to have success growing them. So I choose plants based on whether or not they suit the growing conditions that I've got to offer, and whether or not I can deal with the fact that it could die. And I could not deal with the fact that something I spent $4,000 on would just die overnight. Like, no, I'm not here for that. Hi Jan, this is not a plant question. Have you ever been to Canada? Also, besides the pebble tray, how else would you put moisture in your room with your plants? I do realize you don't have this problem where you live, but I would like to get some of your thoughts. No, I've never been to Canada. I would love to go, but I would definitely go during your summer. Do not like the cold? Sorry. Pebble trays, apparently, I've never tried that, but apparently they do absolutely nothing to your humidity, or like you would need a lot of pebble trays. I think moss pots are a great way to boost your humidity, right? Because if you keep them moist, yes, of course, the water is going to evaporate, which makes everybody angry because they need to water their moss pots frequently. But that water evaporating actually gives your environment a little humidity boost. Group your plants together to create little islands of humidity and so on. I also don't like the use of humidifiers. I feel like humidifiers don't actually improve the humidity in the air that much without causing like puddles on the floor. You know what I mean? The area immediately around the humidifier will always be kind of wet, and the actual ambient humidity in the entire room isn't really going to be increased by that much. Unless you end up having like 7 bloody humidifiers, but then, I don't know, that seems overkill. Basically, moss pots and grouping your plants together, the more the merrier. Hello, now that you're doing this full time, I was wondering if you thought about visiting the countries from where some of your plants grow naturally. I thought maybe seeing them in their native habitat might be a fun video to watch. I would absolutely love to do that, but yes, I'm doing this full time now, but that also means I now only have 1 income instead of 2. And traveling to some of these countries and going on exhibitions to film an anthurium in the wild that then 3.5 people are going to watch on YouTube is just not a sensible business decision at this stage of my life. The videos that perform the best, that I actually make the most revenue from to survive, are literally just videos of me filming my houseplants that cost me nothing to produce. I already have the resources that I need to produce them. So from a business perspective, it is not the best use of my time and my resources, specifically money, to invest into that as part of creating content that I would then expect to make revenue from. You know, I do need to think of this as a business. So from a business perspective, this is not a savvy idea. From a personal perspective, I would definitely love to go and explore some rainforests and see some of these plants in nature and just see the rainforest at large. Not even necessarily like, oh my god, look at this on Thurim, I have this at home. More just like appreciating the nature and how wild it is, and just getting away from everyday life and cities and screens and so on. But would that be my number one holiday destination? Also probably not. So I like the idea of it, but this would be nothing I'm actually actively exploring. If, however, I get invited and it gets paid for, I would absolutely love to do that as part of a business venture and then film and create nice content for you. But it would be nothing that I would initiate, because it's just not. It doesn't make any sense from a business perspective, and it's not my preferred personal holiday destination. But I really liked that question, actually. That was a good one. I mean, just think about it, for example. I went to the Botanic Gardens in the Blue Mountains, and the revenue that the video didn't even cover the tolls that we had to pay to drive on the road to get to the Botanic Gardens. So I cannot justify flying to Costa Rica while I have ongoing costs here in Australia. Like, it wouldn't even cover... It would definitely not cover the cost of going there and existing there, and it would definitely not cover the cost of rent that I have while I'm not here. So I made the decision to make this my only income stream, and yes, with that there comes a lot of flexibility and freedom, but with that there also comes a lot of limitations, right? I need to watch the financial side of things, otherwise this is going to be over before it even began. Do you have any advice for when the plant seems stunted in growth? A few plants I recently bought have had no progress or signs of growth after a month, while others are flourishing. I'm not sure what is causing them to be stunted, since a couple seem to be having this problem when they arrived. Alright, initially, usually when plants seem stunted in their growth or no growth at all or whatever, it is usually something to do with conditions. Conditions set the growth potential, so if the conditions are suboptimal for these plants, then the plant is just not going to grow, or grow in really weird ways. So first and foremost, I would check that the growing conditions that you've got to offer for these plants are suitable. Now, you said that some plants are thriving, some are not. So it could be that, well, some plants are suited to your growing conditions and they're thriving, and those are the ones you should keep, and others might not be suited to your growing conditions. And then maybe at some stage you just have to be realistic and just realize that, you know what, those are just not the plants for you to grow. But it could also be that some plants just have root rot. Sounds like some might just have a unhealthy root system, especially if you just receive them. It could be that the plant is focusing on re-establishing a root system, and as a result of that you see no growth, yellowing leaves, stunted growth, and so on. So I would always check the root system, but in the grand scheme of things, if you only got these plants a month ago, that's not that long for a plant to actually start growing. Sometimes plants can take a really long time. Sorry, I'm trying to find the short cable ties. Sometimes plants can take a really long time to kind of re-establish and build a root system, and then once they have that and they're happy and they're used to the conditions that they're in, then they'll just explode and grow leaf after leaf with the next growing season. So stay patient, but consider your growing conditions and consider root health, I think would be the first things I'll look at. Hey Jan and Brad, I'm very interested to hear more about your experience with the English roses since spending time with Angelique. I've always been an admirer of the English roses, and the experience you shared with them would be greatly appreciated as far as the growing conditions and their ease of care or comfort level of growing them in a home environment rose garden. I know nothing about roses. Actually, nothing is confirmed, but maybe this is going to change next year. But at this stage, I have no knowledge to share with you around this. And when I went to Angelique, yes, Angelique is very much known for roses, but I didn't talk about roses to them at all. So yeah, I don't have anything to really share about this one, unfortunately, with you. But it is part of my endeavor of learning new things about plants at large. I obviously love my houseplants, I love my greenhouse, I love my gardening, but I would also love to go, let's call it, beyond the surface for now, and understand maybe a little bit more about some history of plant cultivation, where roses orchids come to mind, what role plants have played historically. So many countries, so many states, cities or whatever have plants, flowers or leaves and so on as their symbols and so on. So obviously plants have a lot of cultural significance in a lot of countries. Plants have historically been used as medicine, pharmacy, you know, the whole world is a pharmacy and so on. Plants are what fuels the entire world. Everything is based on plants, right? Plants actually produce all the protein in the world. We then just recycle that protein that an animal ate the grass and converted that protein into meat, and then we eat the meat and we're like, oh my god, animal is the best protein. Oh my god, I'm going so off topic. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is plants are amazing and we don't give them enough credit. And while at this stage I'm only growing plants for aesthetic reasons, I'm learning more and more about their impact on my mental health, the impact they have on other people and their mental health, and the impact they have in so many more aspects of our lives. So I really want to embark on this journey, and as part of that I might learn a little bit more about roses as well. But at this stage, unfortunately, nothing to share. Hey Jan, you mentioned in one of your videos that you don't like Hoyas. I think I mentioned that in most videos. What causes disliking? There are so many great Hoyas with very large leaves or small ones with really great leaf structures and leaf colors. Hoyas would definitely do well in your greenhouse, I think. To be really honest, I think I do need to be a little bit more open-minded around Hoyas. I think my dislike comes from the internet. When I think of people with Hoya collections, I just think of this shelf with about 250 tiny pots with like 3-leaved Hoyas in it, and they're like, this one is Hoya, blah blah blah, and blah blah blah, and blah blah blah, and to me they all look the same and none of them looks impressive. There can be some really nicely grown Hoyas that then look really nice as a whole. Right? There are actually also some Hoyas that have really nice leaves that I kind of appreciate, but I haven't. Yeah, I don't know. To me, they're not like this statement piece that I want to grow and decorate my apartment with. But I do agree they can look really nice in the greenhouse, especially if they just go wild and they start attaching. They have some flowers, like AJ has a few Hoyas up in her greenhouse. They can look really nice as part of like an organic display, and like they're great filler in the best way possible. But I've actually been thinking, and if you're in Sydney, or close enough, if you have a nice looking Hoya collection, and by nice looking I mean I want to see leaves, not just pots, right? If you're looking at a shelf and there's more pots than leaves, I'm not interested. Sorry. But if you have like a nice Hoya collection where you got some decent looking Hoyas, I would love for you to convince me otherwise. I would love to come to your place, look at your collection, appreciate your Hoyas, and be convinced that Hoyas are actually really nice. So hit me up in the comment section, please. I do need to be more open-minded about it. But honestly, also when I say that I hate Hoyas at this stage, it's just like a running gag. I just like teasing you guys, because you guys know there's always going to be somebody like, why don't you like Hoyas? I was like, and I'm just living for that moment, so whatever I say, don't take it too seriously, right? Tastes are different. Is it okay to completely dry out your moss pole when gnats are hanging around? The pole doesn't care. I suppose the problem is if your plant has thoroughly rooted into the pole. It's like, can your entire substrate thoroughly dry out because it has gnats? The pole ultimately is just an extension, a vertical extension of the pot, so treat your pole exactly like you would treat your pot. If you let your pot dry out completely to get rid of your fungus gnats, then you rehydrate and your plant doesn't die, then you could technically do the same with a moss pole. That would not be my recommendation though. I would also not let my pots dry out completely. I never do. I just use a really chunky aeroid mix that makes sure that there's always drainage in aeration. I don't like this whole drying out in between waterings. Might work for your Hoyas, might work for your Odd Monstera or so, but I think for most of these tropical rainforest plants, like they're not actually ever drying out. It's constantly moist. Doesn't mean that it's wet. I would say no, don't let it fully dry out, but the surface can definitely dry out a little bit, if that makes sense. So Yeah, but also I've never had fungus nets in my moss piles. I would maybe work on airflow a little bit, which then obviously is going to make your moss piles dry out a little bit more. But I think if you have sufficient airflow, there shouldn't be any fungus nets in the first place. I've been using moss piles for 4 years and I've never had fungus nets in any of my moss piles, and I do get questions about it a lot. So it must be a real issue for some people. I just don't know how, I don't know what I would do because I've never really had the issue. Sorry, I'm not gonna make up some random advice if I don't actually know. But I'm still gonna talk about it for 5 minutes. I'm in New Zealand and our frosts are freezing. Is it still okay to have moss pile wet? So I think the moisture level of your moss pile over here is not the problem. Your aeroids, and I'm assuming you grow aeroids on your moss pile because that's really what they're designed for. Your aeroids don't want freezing conditions, they can't tolerate that. Most of them don't even want to go below 15 degrees, really. So I wouldn't worry so much about your care of the moss pile and the watering frequency of your moss pile and so on. I would be much more worried about the conditions that these plants are in the first place. They're going to cause the plant to die, not the moss pile. What is your day like before and after being a gardener? How do you manage taking care of plants and doing a job at the same time along with some other day-to-day stuff? Assuming you haven't watched my update where I actually quit my job. I quit my job. I don't have that job anymore. But it's only been 2 months of not having the job. And to be honest, I've been busier than I've ever been, even with the job before. Jan from 2 months ago can kind of answer your question. It was really freaking hard. It was really, really hard to have a job and have so many plants and create content. I reckon outside of my previous full-time job, when we're just looking at plant influencing, so growing the plants and creating the content and uploading and replying to comments, I would say that the plant care takes up about 25%, the content creation about 75% of my time. Sometimes obviously I can combine them. For example, I make moss piles while I create content, but me editing this content is going to take 2 to 3 times as long as me filming the content. I'll probably film for 2 hours, but I only made moss piles for 30 minutes and so on. So I need to be really, really efficient with my plant care. And I think because I have a specific type of plant that I like to grow and I have a specific growth approach, aka moss piles, I can very easily scale it up, right? So it comes back to this whole conversation with leca. If I would have so many different things and so many different mediums and so many different ways of caring for plants, and some self-watering, some semi-hydro, some hydro, this bird out there is going ballistic, eh? Some in aeroid mix, some in like whatever, you know, it would obviously overcomplicate things because I have the same approach. I just walk around, flip bottles on top of moss piles, done, you know what I mean? Really, really quick. So I just gotten really efficient and consistent in my care approach, so it doesn't take me all too long anymore. And for the longest time, I kind of tried to water everything on a Wednesday and or a Saturday. So I kind of like the days that I reserved for watering, but eventually I just had too many plants where I couldn't make this work anymore. So I actually just have it's like a continuous effort. Like every day before work, I looked at all of my plants and started watering a little bit here and there, and after work I'll do the same. So instead of let's say doing 4 hours on a Saturday, I rather just do like 30 minutes every day of the week, if that makes sense. Priorities. I didn't exercise as much as I wanted to. I didn't cook as much as I wanted to because I prioritized my plants and content creation as soon as I finished working. But I think if you're really passionate about something, you'll make time for it. If you feel like it's a chore, if you feel like you're not enjoying it, then think about it. Like this should be fun. You should be enjoying your hobby. You know what I mean? You should have a good time exercising your hobby, not feel like you must do this or you have to do this and all of that. So maybe change your plant care approach. That is a little more set and forget. Maybe change your plants that you grow, the ones that don't require that much attention. Maybe reduce the size of your collection and so on. But yeah, it's definitely a lot. There is no like super easy trick that just suddenly makes all the work go away, if that makes sense. the house is on fire, besides spread in your home, which 5 plants would you save? The honest answer is honestly none of them. Like, I'd take my bloody passport. Honestly, there's so many other things I'd much rather save than a plant. I can always buy that plant again and grow that plant again. I'm not so emotionally attached to my plants anymore. I enjoy the process of growing them, not necessarily owning them. But of course, I need to own these plants for my business and for my content. But I feel like 5 wouldn't make a difference. So yeah, but that's still not the answer that you wanted. You probably want to kind of know what are my 5 favorite plants, the precious ones, and let's ignore the fact that I would have to get them out of a burning building, because some of then obviously I would take the small ones. But I'd probably take my Verkoisum, I would take my Queen, I would take my Splendid, I would take my Adansonii, I like her, she's cute. She's been with me since day one, and I think the 5th one I would just grab a random one. I don't know. Right now, can't really think of a fifth one I really want to. Maybe my El Choco. You know I have a certain taste. I want the velvets. I'm going to keep the velvets. What do you do if you can't get a plant to size up and mature? Right now, I'm really struggling to get my Philodendron Majestic to size up. I'm keeping the moss pole moist with fertilizer and it's well rooted in the pole. Also have it under grow light and next to an east window. If the plant doesn't size up, it is usually something wrong with the conditions, not the care, right? Conditions set the growth potential, care realizes the potential. So if it doesn't size up, maybe there's something wrong with the temperatures or the humidity levels or the airflow. Maybe the grow light isn't strong enough, maybe it's not close enough. Maybe you also just haven't allowed enough time. So when it comes to maturity of plants, they obviously need time, but it also depends on how you started that plant. If it comes from a teeny tiny like tissue culture plantlet, for example, that's going to take a little while longer for the plant to actually hit maturity than if you got a plant that came from a mature chunky stem cutting, for example, right? After the stem cutting, the first leaf after the stem cutting might still look small, but it came from a fairly mature cutting and it's going to mature faster again than if you start from like scratch or if you started from a seedling and so on. So maybe consider that. Maybe other people maybe other people can grow the same plant faster because they just had a more mature cutting to start off with. And you can't judge that maturity based on the leaf size of that first leaf. Maybe your plant just doesn't have enough roots to actually support larger leaves. Maybe you're not providing enough nutrients for the plant actually to increase in leaf size. So there's lots of variables that can play into it. And I also don't know what time frame you're talking about when you say you're really struggling to get it to size up. Maybe you're just too ambitious. But I don't know, I'm missing a bit of information. But yeah, I would always first look at the conditions. If you're confident with the conditions, because similar plants in the same conditions are sizing up, then it might have something to do with the plant in itself, and or maybe fertilizer. Anthuriums. I have a sunroom that is full of light but no direct sun. Unfortunately, would I still use grow lights? Probably not. As I said in a question before, anthuriums don't need all too much light in the first place. I have my anthurium collection supported by a grow light over here, because if it wasn't for the grow light, this is like really, really dark. Don't think it comes across on camera, but this south-facing window, it's south-facing, and I'm in the southern hemisphere, so it's like a north-facing window in the northern hemisphere. There's just not that much light coming through, so I just have to supplement. But if you're growing it in a sunroom that doesn't have a bloody ceiling and it gets plenty of bright indirect light but no direct sunlight, it actually sounds perfect. That's exactly where they grow up in nature. They would grow imagine there's like a big tree and there's like a little branch, and in that branch and that little, like the little dip where the branch goes, I'm sure there's a word for it. There's some like leaves and debris and mosses and whatever accumulating, and the anthurium just like grows in there, and it would be shaded by the canopy above. So it wouldn't get direct light, but it would get bright light. So Sounds actually perfect for anthuriums. The plant community has broken into an all-out tribal warfare with factions fighting for control of fertilizer and water supplies. You've been called to battle. The leaves of the plants in your collection have been imbued with mystical powers. You pick a leaf of 2 plants and head to battle. Which plant did you pick and what powers do they possess? I think that's too deep for me. I think I'm too logical of a person to answer this question. I will probably pick a glorious because it's nice and large, and it would be like an invisible cloak. What else is it? Let's just say the other one would be a queen, and everybody just chills. Like when they see the queen leaf, they just relax. So everybody can chill. Yeah, I think that's my preference. Everybody just needs to calm down. We don't need to fight over fertilizer. So the queen would just come in and she would just make everybody chilled. So we can all just go home, sit on the couch and watch Netflix again, please. That would be good. Meow. Meow. What's happening? Yeah? Alright, next question. Misting indoor plants, yay or nay? Nay. Is Brett bilingual? And if so, does he prefer to speak in German or English? Bradley? I never speak German to Bradley. He's Aussie. He grew up in Australia. He was born here. You're a little Aussie, aren't you? He's pissed off. He's sitting here now. Anyway, I speak English to him. I don't think I've ever spoken German to him. Have I ever spoken? No, I don't think I have. But my mom spoke a bit of German to him, and he also ignored her. Easy. He's a cat. He is very good at ignoring us. How many plants do you buy per month? Honestly, not that many. If I buy plants, it's usually like a plant for my garden and it just kind of disappears in the abyss of the garden. You hardly notice that I did that. And I don't really buy many expensive plants. I mean, I just bought a few plants at the Collector's Plant Fair, but that's about it. There's definitely months where I don't buy none. And then probably when we're heading into spring, I'll buy heaps again. But yeah, I don't know. So I mentioned before, I don't really have anything on my wish list. I'm not really like big on like, oh my god, I need to have them all. I am much more considered with, do I really want this plant? Is this plant actually going to thrive in my house? Is this plant going to add something to my collection that I don't already have? And if it doesn't meet all of that criteria, then it might just be not worth the effort and money. And adding to the problem I want to reduce. I want to reduce my... sounds so bad because obviously I love my plants and they're such great, they bring me so much joy and I love looking after them, but I don't want it to turn into a liability where suddenly I can't travel, I can't do things here and there, I can't live my life the way that I want to live my life because my entire business is relying on having as many plants as possible and so on. You know what I mean? Like, of course, I just want to go for quality over quantity at the moment because it would still give me that satisfaction. I think I would still be able to create good content, but I'm reducing the liability that they have. I'm reducing the amount of space that I need to provide for them and so on. So yeah. Rambling on. Do you ever consider moving back to Germany? Not for my own sake, maybe if needed for my family, but not personally. Like, would not be my desired outcome in life. How's the acceptance of LGBTQIA+ in Australia or Sydney in comparison to Germany or Berlin or where you lived? I haven't lived in Germany in 12 years, and when I lived in Germany I was a high school child, so teenager. I just turned 19, so in general, I've actually had a lot of these questions and or suggestions around, compare Australia to Germany. I don't think I'm in any position to make any comparison because I don't know what things are different in Australia because of Australia, or are things different because, well, the world is changing every year a lot. Like 2012, things were very different to 2024, right? Like, maybe things have changed over here and they changed in Germany at the same rate, and I'm just not aware of all of the change, like at least not firsthand in Germany. And also my experience in Germany, like I'm such a different person. I have made so many more experiences in life. I know more what I stand for, what my values are, and I'm a more independent person and thinker than when you just moved out of home and finished high school, right? So I don't know, but I'm pretty sure Berlin is very well known for LGBTQIA plus acceptance. So is Sydney. We have Mardi Gras every year, but then also it depends on which part of Sydney you're in, which part of Australia you're in. Of course, you'll always find some parts are safer than others. Hey Jan, I follow all of your tips with moss pots, philodendron, monstera, etc. and have great success except verrucosum. A philodendron verrucosum just sucks. Will grow a leaf or two, then they'll shrivel up. Not sure what I'm doing wrong. I always had the easiest time with verrucosum until shit hit the fan with my mother plant, and then it was just this downward spiral where I was like, oh my god, I don't actually know how to fix this. Like, I haven't even changed anything. It's just, I don't know. I started another one, great success with this one so far. So I kind of understand where the suckiness comes from that you're explaining. I reckon it's down to a couple of things. First of all, spider mite magnet. They always have spider mites. Ideally, take them out for a shower every week, so to just prevent spider mites in the first place. And if you do have spider mites, I use Vitality Plus, which has been discontinued. So sorry, can't really be of help with that. The second thing I think that really sucks with verrucosum is the poor root system. They have really fine, skinny, disappointing roots compared to the leaf size, at least, right? If you compare that to like a Gigas, for example, Gigas has like these chunky roots, or Glorious has these chunky roots. Verrucosum has really, really shitty roots. If a plant has a poor root system, it's going to have a harder time absorbing water and nutrients. It's going to have a harder time holding on to a lot of leaves. So that's where the moss pole usually helps with, but clearly it doesn't really in your instance. Verrucosums also like really high humidity. They naturally grow in high altitude cloud forests, which means that it's very humid and a little bit cooler. So mine likes the cooler temperatures. Cooler, I mean more like 20 degrees rather than 28. And bright indirect light. It's in a south-facing window. It doesn't get any direct sun, it just gets bright indirect light. And that seems to be doing the trick. I don't know if that's helpful to you, but I know that a lot of people really struggle with verrucosum. Maybe it's just not your plant to grow. Maybe the conditions you've got are just not suited for it. Maybe try a hybrid of verrucosum instead, like a Splendid, for example. Not quite as nice in my opinion, still really, really nice. But the hybrids usually have, you'll have a much easier time. Hi Jan, I hope you can help me with my reverted Monstera albo. It's on a moss pole and aeroid mix as the medium. Thanks in advance. I'm assuming you want me to help you with the reverted part. There's nothing you can do with your moss pole or your mix or your fertilizer or whatnot to help with the reverted part. That is just in the way, the DNA, like the way that the plant works. So the best way for you to go about this is actually chopping your plant and hoping that the new growth points will show variegation. And you having grown it on a moss pole gives you the perfect opportunity to do all of these chops with hopefully 100% success, propagation success. And there is a video where I've done that with my Monstera Deliciosa Variegata, where I grew it up a moss pole, I chopped it, and then I kind of multiplied it into 7. But that one wasn't reverted, so because all of the cuttings already had variegation, all of the new shoots also had variegation. But yeah, if you want to change, if your plant is either going too wide or too green or whatever, usually cutting and hoping that the new shoot will be more viable is the solution. How is it going now as a full-time content creator, and are you planning on doing some community events when visiting Germany? You definitely have German-based fans. I definitely would love to, I'll definitely visit Germany at some stage, because that's where my family is. So that one I can confidently confirm. I don't know when, and when I do come, I would love to definitely create content and maybe catch up with some content creators as well. Whether I would do a community event, I'm not too sure. I haven't even done a community event in Sydney, and I live here 365 days of the year. I think for two reasons. First of all, I think it's a little bit... Like, I like the... Yeah. I mean, people have asked me before if I do like a meet and greet. I think that sounds so wanky. I don't know. I feel a bit uncomfortable thinking about like a meet and greet. Like, if I'm invited somewhere and I happen to meet and greet a lot of people, I'm very confident with that. But me going out there and be like, hey, I'm coming to Germany, meet me, I don't know, to me it comes across so wanky. So I think I would just feel really uncomfortable putting it together myself. If I were invited to an event like that, I'd feel very comfortable with it. But I think it's this whole like showing the initiative in it that comes across as a little bit arrogant to me. And I don't like doing things that make me feel uncomfortable. That is just not what I'm here for. But I definitely know that I've got a lot of German friends online, and I love meeting as many people as possible. I definitely thrive in social settings. So definitely something to consider. But when I do go to Germany, my priority is my family, for sure. So need to see how long I can stay there for without jeopardizing my business at home. Where and when did you first come across the chop and extend method? Did you invent this technique? You seem to be well known for this. I learned this from you and your channel. No, I definitely did not invent that. I believe I might have put the term chop and extend to it. I think that's just how I call it, to kind of really quickly refer back to it. And I suppose it kind of makes sense, right? Because that's exactly what it is. Now, I definitely did not invent this. If any, it's actually just air layering. That's it. It's just a fancy term of saying that you air layer the plant and then you propagate it. That's really what it is. But I specifically got inspired by Craig Miller-Randall on Instagram. He kind of, he gave me a lot of inspiration around moss poles in general and plant decorating and aesthetics and so on. And I saw that first with him, where he actually he had a really leggy plant and he cut it off because he didn't like the empty part at the bottom of the pole. He then took the whole pole and propagated the whole pole in a bucket of further moss for a couple of months, and then potted it back up and re-extended it. And I was like, I like this, but do you really have to propagate it further after the chop? So I tried the whole process without further propagation and just popping it straight into the pot. I mean, technically that's still propagation, just propagating an aeroid mix instead of moss. Anyway, I just potted it straight up and I was like, let's just hope for the best. And it worked. And I did it again and it worked again. And I did it like, I think 5 or 6 times before I ever talked about it. So yeah, it makes total sense. I cannot take any credit for the actual process though, but maybe I can take a little bit of credit for the actual term chop and extend. But I could also be completely delusional on this one and maybe somebody else called it chop and extend beforehand. In your 2022 video, My Philodendron Collection Part 1 Crawlers, you placed a silver cloud on a moss pole as an experiment. I'm curious to know if you persevered, and if so, did you have any success getting it to climb? No, I'll insert a photo over here if I can find it. That plant just grew horizontally on that vertical pole. So what's the point? Might as well just give it a horizontal surface to grow on, aka a pot. So after that I took it off that pole and I just potted it into like a large rectangular planter instead. I don't like forcing nature. We're already cheating nature enough growing them in pots in our concrete and houses. I don't need to cheat the growth pattern or force a growth pattern that is unnatural to the plant on top of that. If you really want to have success, I think it's always smart to go with nature rather than against nature. But I'm not saying it's not possible. I have seen other people make it work, but it is requiring you to continuously force the plant to grow against how it wants to grow. How many corms do you have in your oxalis? I don't know. All I know is that it started with 1 corm about 4 years ago that I potted it in a pot, and then it just multiplied itself. And every time I repot it, I don't actually disturb the root system or the whole system. I just take it, put it in a larger pot and fill out the gaps. So I don't know how many corms are in there. All I know is that it started with 1 and it was all multiplied by itself. How you manage time for older plants and feline companions. Now that I don't have my corporate job anymore, that's definitely a little bit easier. But as I mentioned before, I'm really efficient at doing things. And if you really enjoy something, you will put the effort and time into it. And sometimes the busier you are, the more you get done, if that makes sense, because you just completely eliminate the whole procrastination stage or the overthinking stage. You have so little time, you just get things done. Actually, since I don't have my corporate job anymore, I overthink things so much more, and I'm more hesitant in doing things, and I overcomplicate things where I actually end up being less productive than before. Is what it is. What is the thing that got you into plants? Love your videos. Have a nice day or night. Well, still day, even though it has been raining for 5 days non-stop. So I doubt it will ever be nice today, but thank you. What got me into plants is, I definitely think, social media. Definitely social media heavily inspired me to grow plants, and my goal was to use plants as statement pieces in my apartment to decorate it, because as a renter I'm very limited with what I can do. I'm very house proud. I want to create a nice atmosphere and invite friends over and make them feel welcome and host parties and so on. So I wanted to make it feel really homey and really nice, but I can't renovate. Be as creative as I would want to be if I would be owning. So plants is kind of like my creative outlet and my way of adding art into my house. And I love a good challenge. I do love a good challenge. I love growing plants large. Have you bought a plant and did you regret it? Don't think I ever have. No. I don't think I'm drunk by anything really. When I'm drunk, I send questionable texts, but don't buy things. Yeah, definitely. What other passions or hobbies are you interested in pursuing, and are you currently dating? And the next question is, are you dating anybody? And the next question after that is, do you have a boyfriend? All right, so you guys are very keen on my private life. Let's talk about my passions and hobbies first. I love sports and I love exercise. I love tennis. I love playing tennis. I could watch pretty much any bloody sport on television. Love it. Excited for the Olympics coming up. It's like a smorgasbord of like sports you would never ever see otherwise. So that's awesome. I love exercising. I love moving my body. I love being out in nature. I love catching up with my friends. I love deep and meaningful conversations, but also just bloody love a good laugh. So I think that's enough for now. I don't know. I'm definitely on the hunt for new hobbies. Now that plants have become my profession, I would love to add a few more hobbies into my life. And then, are you currently dating? I appreciate that you want to know more about me, but you know, when it comes to dating, there's usually more than one person involved. So, you know, I'm happy to be open with my personal life and things that impact me and my thoughts and my values and my opinions, but I also want to be respectful as soon as there's somebody else involved. So I don't think you'll ever hear anything about my private life, so my dating life, on this channel. I might change my mind at some stage, maybe if the other person is also comfortable with that. But yeah, I think it's called private life for a reason. But yeah, I am just a normal person that has feelings and desires and goes through ups and downs. Monstera albo and Monstera Thai, the brown spots on the leaves, do you think they are difficult plants? Okay. I don't think they're super difficult plants because they're ultimately Monstera deliciosa, which is a pretty easygoing plant, but obviously the variegation in either of those isn't contributing to photosynthesis. It's a mutation that's basically holding the plant back, right? So it's totally normal to have brown spots on the white parts of your variegated plants. I don't think that necessarily makes them difficult. It might just not make them as aesthetically pleasing as you might have hoped. I like a more mottled variegation rather than sectoral. If you have full chunks of white, they will brown more quicker. But eventually, every leaf will brown. Every single leaf will eventually brown. If it's white or green or in between or whatever, leaves only have a limited lifespan. They will not be green forever. They'll die, even in nature. It's fine, there's new ones coming, right? Do you have siblings? If so, are they also in Sydney? I have one sister, and no, she still lives in my hometown, where the rest of my family lives as well. How are you and Brettles? Thank you for asking. Brettles is asleep off screen right there, and I'm okay, I have to say. I've had better days, I've had worse days. I can 100% get in my head. You know, as I said with the question before, I'm also just a normal person with normal feelings, self-doubts, issues, you know. Not everything always goes according to plan. Chronic overthinker, so, you know, I love a good worst case scenario. Sometimes I have difficulties understanding that, hey, this is actually just a worst case scenario that you have fabricated in your head. It's not actually happening in real life. But I also just need to remind myself that, you know what, sometimes when I'm feeling a little bit down, I just need to look out the window and realize that, hang on, I think you're just feeling down because it's been raining for 5 days. I love the sun. My mood is often with the weather. If it's nice and sunny, I'm nice and happy. If it's cold and dark, I'm cold and dark. So given that it's been pissing down for 5 days straight, I think I'm actually doing really well today. But thank you for the question, I appreciate it. What is a good plant to put on a moss pole but for an absolute beginner? And what if I literally don't have light in my room? There is no plant that can survive without any light. They certainly won't thrive if there's no light. The only thing you can do is you can choose a plant that takes a really long time to die, like a snake plant or a cactus or a succulent. If you just put it there, it will take the longest to die if you compare it to like an aeroid. So no, light will always set the growth potential, will always set the potential to even just survive. So maybe growing plants is not the hobby for you. It's like me living in the desert saying, do you think I should get into ice skating? So definitely you need to fix the light issue, but there's grow lights, you don't need to have natural light. And a plant for an absolute beginner, pothos, get a pothos. That's a really good first plant. There's actually a lot of questions around people like, what plants are you buying next? What plants are you looking forward to? What's on your wish list? But I think I've addressed this in detail already. So apologies, I won't answer every single question, but I think they're kind of, some of them are kind of just, I think some of these questions were indirectly answered already. Can you mix up the fertilizer, put it in water bottles and not use it immediately for a house sitter when I'm on vacations? That's what I do. I actually just all pre-mix it and then it just is in my cupboard and I use it throughout the week. So I think the longest it would stay pre-mixed for is about 5 to maybe 5 days or so. I haven't noticed any issues with it. I think it might depend on the fertilizer that you use as well. If it's organic, it might... Maybe if it's organic, something is gonna happen. I don't know. I use a mineral fertilizer, which should be fine. I haven't noticed any issues. So, and I've been doing that for years now. So, from my experience, I would say yes, you can definitely mix it in and then just store it and not use it immediately. How do you deal with extreme heat when you are away? Phytos and anthuriums don't enjoy it too much. Well, even when I'm here, I can't really change the extreme heat, specifically outdoors. I mean, indoors you can have air conditioning and so on. There is very little you can do about it, especially if you're not here. You just need to hope for the best. Maybe put the plants in a shady corner. I don't know. I mean, I honestly, I don't deal with it at all. I just hope for the best. There's no strategy involved, unfortunately. Can you use live sphagnum moss for a moss pole? I seem to have bought a 36-litre pack of it without reading the description first. Yeah, I've seen people do it. I think in my submission video, the Inspired by SPD, somebody from England just got their moss from the backyard and used that as a moss pole. It's probably even better than the pressed dead sphagnum moss that I use. So yeah, go for it. How did your family react to you quitting your safe pay job to become a full-time YouTuber? Thanks in advance and greetings from Munich. Well, my sister really loved it. She was like, oh my god, yes, you should have done this ages ago. So my sister was really happy for me. My mom was a little happy for me, but I think a little more concerned. I think this day and age, no job is a safe paid job, really. I mean, I'm allowed to say this, I think. Yes, why wouldn't I? I've seen a few people from my previous work actually now looking for work on LinkedIn because their job was made redundant due to offshoring, due to introduction of artificial intelligence and so on. So you don't need to quit your job to lose your job. You can be made redundant, right? And this day and age, that happens very frequently, especially here in Australia, where we have really, really high minimum wages. A lot of jobs are being outsourced to offshore companies that offer, especially like administrational support or, these sort of things, very cost effectively. Can't blame a business for that either. Like if I were to use help for my business, I would probably also look offshore because it's just a more viable business model that way. A lot of creative jobs are now being replaced by AI. As much as we say AI can't be creative, it can do Photoshop much better than somebody who's studied this stuff for a long time and so on. So it can write whole marketing briefs and whatnot for you. So once I explained to my mom hang on, actually my job was never really that safe in the first place, I think she was a little less concerned, if that makes sense. I think we're just in a very different environment right now. I think once we talked it through a little bit more, she was more confident with it. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's my life. I can't live my life based on how people that aren't living my life perceive it. So it wasn't really for them to judge, just to accept. How do you manage mosquitoes when you're relaxing or working in your garden? Honestly, I haven't really found a major solution. I have used mosquito bits in the garden, which is supposed to break the cycle of them, which I think made a little bit of an impact. And then I'd use the mozzie coils and AeroGuard to actually protect me from the ones that are already there. But yeah, I think I just suck it up. At some stage, there's definitely, specifically this year in Sydney, there seems to have been a big mozzie issue. Not just in my garden, like everywhere you go. So, yeah. Does your mom and sister have the love of plants that you do? No, they do not. That is definitely. I mean, my mom had bonsai and cacti growing up, but when I grew up, she had them, but I think I'm definitely unique in my extent in which I love plants. That is definitely something I kind of developed by myself rather than it was given to me as part of my upbringing. I know in the past you've said you can't explain how densely to stuff the moss poles, but would you consider weighing some empty moss poles and then weigh them when you stuff them and they've dried out? Actually, I think I've done this before. A 500 gram pack of dried moss makes 6 moss poles. So that's between 80 to 90 gram per moss pole. That's the ones I make myself. How do you regulate temperatures in your greenhouse? Mine is always either boiling lava hot or frozen. I have no approach to heating. I was hoping I'll have this epiphany before winter comes, but winter hit me really hard this week. And I'm like, I have no solution. Let's just hope for the best. For reducing temperatures in summer, I'm misting. What products are you using on your plants? Do you use nitrogen or an endomycorrhizal or favorite net product? I don't have any net issues, so I don't have a net product, and my fertilizer is always linked in the description. Actually, all the products that I can confidently recommend to you are always linked in the description, and there's a product tab on my website as well where you can find all of them. And if there is a discount code, then it's going to be there as well. I don't have discount codes for all of them, unfortunately, but where I do have one, it's always in the description and on my website. So just have a look through there. I'm pretty hesitant in recommending certain products if I haven't used them for long enough. Those are all products that I have been using for a long time in my plant journey, and I can very confidently pass that on. How did you prepare your bottles for watering your moss pots? Which size of drill, etc.? Thank you. I just take a drill and I just put a few holes in there. I've used whatever drill is on the drill at the moment, to be honest. I don't overthink it. Sometimes I have 4 little holes, sometimes I have 3 larger holes, sometimes I have like 3 smaller holes, sometimes I have 4 larger holes. Honestly, I think as long as you've got at least 2 holes, it should be fine. 1 hole to release the water and then 1 hole for the air to go back in, you know what I mean? So as long as you have 2, it should be fine. Also keep in mind that you can change the flow of water by manipulating the contact of the lid and the moss. If the lid makes no contact with the moss, no water would flow out. It doesn't matter how many holes are in there because of the surface tension of the water. So you can, by wiggling it around on top of the moss pole, you're kind of blocking some holes, or you're freeing up some holes, or you're kind of breaking that surface tension of that water, and then you just see the flow of water. So I think that wiggling around and the positioning on the moss is more important than the size or the amount of holes in the lid. I ordered a Monstera albo on Etsy, but it had no nodes. I planted in soil. What chance it has to grow roots, if any? Unfortunately, no chances of this ever turning into a plant. You do need a node, and you need a growth point on that node as well. So that's very unfortunate. I haven't heard the best things about Etsy, especially when it comes to like selling wet sticks. So that's very sad. I'm sorry to hear, but unfortunately, don't get your hopes up. It's basically impossible. What else can you do if you have your moss pole in a plastic pot, sitting in a heavy ceramic pot, but the dang thing still keeps falling over? Insight to this question: this keeps happening to me, and one potted plant in particular keeps falling over. I had it on a plant stand, but the dang thing fell over. The ceramic pot fell on my foot, and now I have a bruised foot. Oh my god, sorry for laughing, but the way that you wrote it is funny. It now lives in a ceramic pot on the floor, but keeps falling over. I'm at a loss why it is the only one I have this problem with and what to do about it. I have tried changing different kinds of ceramic pots. Now the plant is really struggling in its life because not only does it fall over, but the whole moss pole and plant came completely out of the soil. Okay, maybe you just need to go a larger pot then. Maybe it just needs a bit larger of a surface to stand on. Also, if all of your leaves, let's say, face forward, for example, well, tilt the moss pole backwards when you pot it up, right? So the moss pole might be tilted like this way, so that when the leaves point forward, it actually then creates a center point of gravity again that is not making it fall over. That's the best advice I can give you. I get this question a lot, and people don't actually believe me that my plants aren't just falling over left, right and center, but they're just not. I think the only plant I'm currently struggling with is my Splendid, because it's super front heavy and it has huge leaves and heaps of huge leaves. So that's the only one I'm struggling with, and that one I've just got wedged into a corner to kind of keep it there. But maybe try a bigger pot with a bigger ceramic planter then as well, just to give it a larger, not necessarily to make it heavier, but also to just give it a bigger surface. Could you show us your smaller plants? I'm curious to see what else besides this huge gorgeous plants you have. Love your videos and seeing little Bradley. Still sleeping over there, completely ignoring you today. I would have. I'm not too sure where exactly in the timeline all of this sits. There is a houseplant tour coming. It's either coming up the following video or it came out the previous video, but in that video there's actually 2. One is like a really short and sharp one, and one is one where I literally show you every single plant, so you'll also then see all of my plants. But if you want to see my smaller plants, also just search for IKEA cabinet on my channel, and all of my small plants are in the IKEA cabinet. Most everyone around me consider that having lots of plants, especially indoors, is a hassle, a big hassle, especially when moving. How do you manage all of it? Have you ever given up on some of them? Also, is it true that some of them can worsen the humidity when it's hot, or they actually cooling the air indoors? Okay, a couple of questions. Let's address the humidity and the cooling of the air and so on. Well, when it comes to worsen, I think you're referring to an increase in humidity as worsening it. I actually like an increase in humidity, but it depends on where you live. You're probably worried about mold. I personally haven't had any mold issues as a result of my plants, so I don't think this is necessarily a concern, but it also depends on the insulation of your house. Are they actually cooling the air indoors? You could say yes, because of the increased humidity it feels cooler, but realistically I think you would need to have a lot of plants. Same as going with like air purifying. My plants are not purifying my air. I would need to have way more plants to actually make a significant impact on air purification. I think my recommendation here is stop caring what everybody else says. If they think it's a hassle, then yeah, maybe they don't want to do it, but that's fine. They don't need to do it. Is it a hassle for you? Are you enjoying it? Yes or no? If you're enjoying it, keep doing it. If you're not enjoying it or you're feeling like it's too much for you, don't do it. From my personal perspective, and I think I touched on this throughout this video in general, that no, I don't think it's a hassle. I definitely enjoy my plant care part, and the plant care isn't even taking that much time. Definitely doesn't make it easier when it comes to moving, but I don't think necessarily the process of moving is the issue. It's more finding a suitable home for all of the plants that's a problem. But it can definitely be a bit of a hassle when it comes to things like going on a holiday and you know, you have like a week where you're just not super motivated, let's say. But my love for plants and the joy that they bring me way outweighs the negatives. But I do want to find maybe a more sustainable compromise. Do you ever find the aeroid mix at the bottom of the pot still moist, wet, while the moss pole is dry? What should you do? I actually have the opposite. I forget to water the mix and it stays too dry and the moss pole is moist because, I don't know, I forget about the pot. What you should do though is stick to the same watering frequency but water with less volume. So instead of, you're clearly watering with enough water for the water to drain all the way through the moss pole and then still into the pot. Well, if the pot is still moist, or hopefully it's never wet, hopefully it's just moist, then use less water so that the water doesn't drain all the way through. It just drains through the moss pole, but not enough to go all the way into the pot. So same frequency, less volume. I know Monstera Thai Constellation doesn't need a moss pole, but what are your thoughts and recommendations about one growing on a moss pole? Actually, if you watch the Collectors Plant Fair tour, there is Tim from Grow Vertical's Thai Constellation, and he has it on a Grow Vertical and it looks so good. I was inspired, and I think with the next repot I might put mine on a Grow Vertical as well. So yeah, I think it looks good. Grows with very, very short internodal spacing. So I would probably put her on a shorter, thicker moss pole rather than a long, skinny one. I've heard you mention in one of your videos that the best time to put a plant on a moss pole is as soon as possible. Is there a general guideline for this? I'm asking because I recently acquired a baby verrucosum with around 5 small leaves, about 3 to 4 centimeters long, and I immediately placed it on a moss pole. They didn't do well, yellowing tips, and when I asked around the online plant community for help, I was told that it was too early to put it on a moss pole. Alright, no, that was not too early to put it on a moss pole. It might have just been too early to repot it. The moss pole is probably not the issue over here. All principles of normal repotting still apply. You're just adding a moss pole into the pot with the plant, right? So maybe it was just not time for your verrucosum to be repotted because you just got it and it was already going through shock. Maybe the verrucosum didn't have enough of a root system to actually be potted up if it was a water propagation or something like that. The amount of leaves and the size of the leaves are kind of completely irrelevant when it comes to the repotting conversation. We need to repot based on the root system. If it has a healthy root system but it's outgrowing its pot, then go for it. Give it a larger pot and then chuck a moss pole in there at the same time so the plant can start taking full advantage of it. I have started verrucosums on moss poles when they only had their original leaf. Like I started cuttings, like a stem cutting with one leaf on a moss pole where the new shoot is then starting to grow up the moss pole straight away. So no, you don't need to wait for a specific amount of moss leaves or a specific size of the leaves. You're really potting it up once the root system is ready to be potted up. and you chuck a moss pole in there. Running out of battery again. Geez, this is going to be a long video, I reckon. How did you get your oxalis so gorgeous? I have one I want to be like yours. Does it go dormant? I had mine outside and brought it in for winter. Should I put it back out or leave her inside? Thanks, your plants are the very best. Thank you. All right. First of all, it took a long time. That oxalis is also about 4-ish years old now, right? I got that very early in my plant journey, and it really only started looking really nice and lush about 2 years into the journey. I actually have a full video on it as well in my plant spotlight playlist, where you'll see it kind of grow up over the years. So first and foremost, you will need time, but obviously also depends on how many corms you start off with. I started off with 1, so it took a much longer time. You could also get 3 or 4 pots, you know, with lots of corms in them, plant them all together, and then yes, they can go dormant if exposed to cooler temperatures, but they will also come back really, really quickly as well. I think the recipe for them to grow really fast is really light. Much more light than you think. They kind of look a little bit dainty and like, you know, cute skinny leaves and so on. But I think realistically they can actually handle a lot of light. And I even give mine direct sun. And as a result of light, they're gonna be really thirsty as well. So don't let it dry out, and a more water retentive mix. And no, I would not put it back out for winter, because it will probably go dormant, unless that's what you want. And sometimes going dormant, I mean, that is kind of how they would grow in nature. Sometimes dormancy can actually help the plant come back bigger and stronger the following year. Mine, however, has never been dormant in 4 years. Ficus tenyki has brownish spots on leaves. I think my watering is just fine. The spots started shortly after I brought it home. Later on I had to treat it for mealybugs. The new upper leaves are just fine. Will the leaves with the brown spots keep getting worse? I don't grow any ficus, so I can't really troubleshoot much over here. Also really hard to say anything without seeing the plant and actually seeing what might have caused the brown spots to then determine whether or not it's going to get worse. It's definitely not going to get better. But yeah, sorry, I don't want to lead you in the wrong direction, so I'd rather not give you any advice on this one. Apologies. I have several aquariums and use the dirty water for my plants. I just watched a video where you link GT Foliage Focus. Could you please tell me if my plants will benefit from GT Foliage? As far as I can tell, the fish water is very good for my plants. Oh, I also mix in silica. If anyone else knows the answer to this, please feel free to comment. I don't want to purchase a product if I don't have to. Let the plants tell the story. If you're happy with the plant's growth, then don't fix what's not broken. If you feel like your conditions are beautiful, you're on top of your care, but you're not seeing the results that you're expecting, then maybe try something new, add more nutrients. But in theory, what you are doing sounds really good. I also heard really good things about silica. And I know that a lot of people use the dirty water from the aquarium for their plants, and there are nutrients in there. So don't fix what's not broken, but worth a shot. Maybe you can even further increase your plant's growth if you want that, but maybe that's not it. Maybe as part of the plant hobby, your goal is not to just make it grow as large and as fast as possible. Maybe you just want it to be like low key and easy going, and as part of that, maybe you don't want to purchase products, and then what you're doing sounds fine. With the GT Foliage Focus, however, it is a plant nutrient that has all, is it 12 or 13 or 14 or 16 or something like that? I think 12. All 12 essential minerals bioavailable in the right proportion. So it is a really good product that I can definitely recommend and a huge contributor to my success. But can you have success without it? For sure. Do you by any chance have Philodendron biliatii variegata in your house or garden? If so, may I know the tips of taking care of this plant in detail? I don't have that, but in general, I don't really give detailed care tips for specific plants, because care tips are first and foremost heavily reliant on the conditions that the plant is growing in, your approach to growing. So are you growing it in leca, in a chunky aeroid mix, in a more water retentive aeroid mix? Are you growing it on a moss pole or not, and so on? And obviously you as well, you know, like how much effort are you willing to go in? And then yes, it somehow obviously depends on the plant and the plant's DNA itself, but my care tips for like, think about it. Look at all of these plants over here. They're all getting the same conditions and they're getting the same care. Apart from the queen. The queen is in a slightly different mix. All of my plants downstairs on moss piles, they're in the same mix, on the same moss pile, getting the same conditions, getting the same care in the same frequency. There isn't a detailed care approach for each specific species, and I hope I made that clear on my channel in general, where like this is never what you're gonna get from me. I've done plant spotlights where I showed you the journey of a specific plant and then something I have learned about this specific plant, but when it comes to my care recommendations or my care principles, they're pretty much always the same, because I have chosen plants that all appreciate the same conditions, because those are the conditions that I've got to offer. Long way of saying that me not having one myself doesn't mean that you can't take my growth principles and apply them. Everything that you hear on my channel hopefully is general enough for you to make some learnings out of it and apply it to your own situation, your plant, your care approach, your materials available, and so on. Oh, well, that's it. It was only 73 questions in the end, because some of them were repeats, but wow, 73 questions, that's still a lot. I'm feeling exhausted. Brett has been sleeping the whole time. And in case you're wondering about this, by the way, I commissioned a good friend of mine to make this for me, and I'll leave her Instagram account down below as well, and I would appreciate if you check her out and maybe give her a follow. Alrighty, wow, that was lengthy. I know a lot of you just put it on and let me waffle on in the background while you go do something else as well. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to watch or listen to more of this video, this is not my first Q&A. I think this is maybe my 6th or maybe my 7th Q&A I've ever done on this channel. So there is hours and hours and hours of footage of me answering your questions, and I'll link that at the end screen. It's all in a little playlist. So I would appreciate if you check this out, and I'll see you next time around. Take care.